Good morning, Realtors. Today is Friday, May 1st, and welcome back to GADcast, brought to you by the North Shore-Barrington Association of Realtors. My name is Joe Roth, and I'm your local government affairs director here with NSBAR. GADcast is the latest podcast offering from NSBAR that will keep you updated on what's happening in the world of realtor advocacy. Each episode will feature a special guest where we dive a little deeper into the issues and just how we're fighting for realtors and their clients. Finally, for those of you listening live, feel free to ask any questions through the comments. Being involved in property management, either as an owner or agent, presents a lot of challenges. This is especially true in Cook County, where there are a number of regulations that are unique for our region. The latest of these is the Just Housing Ordinance, which became effective on February 1st for all housing providers in Cook County. Luckily, we have a team of advocates that understand the nuances of these issues and always working to represent your interests. And that brings us to this week's very special guest. I'm very excited about it, Mr. Mike Scobey. Officially, Mike is the Director of Local Advocacy with Illinois REALTORS, but unofficially, I like to think of Mike as more of the leader and, guru of everything that is local advocacy when it comes to private property rights throughout Illinois. So Mike, welcome to GADcast.
Thanks, Joe, and good morning all, and thanks for that introduction, Joe.
All right, so can you give us a little background on the Just Housing Ordinance, where it came from, and how all this started?
Sure, so the Just Housing Ordinance, which was passed by the Cook County Board last April, sprang from the whole criminal justice reform movement. And this movement is a nationwide movement, and it's involved a variety of activities and policies at the federal and state level. This ordinance is the first serious attempt in Illinois to do criminal justice reform at the local level. And the focus with this ordinance is on housing and a person's criminal history or criminal background. So the ordinance was introduced last March, and we quickly analyzed it and weighed in on it. It came from a group of fair housing advocates, tenants' rights groups, and organizations that work with the formerly incarcerated. So that's a pretty potent lineup of groups that we were working up against, a coalition that was pretty strong. And we were also dealing with a new Cook County board, which had some new additions, a changed type of board since the 2018 general election. In the board, there were two new additions, persons who call themselves Democratic Socialists. So you can see that the board took a more progressive form after the 2018 elections. So at the public hearing on the ordinance, which was held just a couple of days prior to its passage, we expressed all of our concerns with the ordinance. We made clear that we certainly understand or understood the need for housing for persons who have a criminal background and how it's important to get them into the housing pipeline. And, we're trying to help people who are formerly incarcerated trying to reestablish their lives. But we also expressed how this had to be balanced with our concerns, owner concerns, resident concerns. After all, these are residents in multifamily properties, and they'd be residing literally within feet of persons with a criminal background. So we talked about risks, we talked about liability. We may mention the fact that, a person who has a criminal background, some of them might still have some criminal inclinations, and they'd be residing in multifamily properties. So when they passed the ordinance last April, they told us that all of our concerns that we expressed would be addressed. They put in the ordinance a rules provision that said, we're going to get at issues like risk and liability and how to screen persons with a criminal background in these rules, which we'll adopt later. So we spent the better part of last summer and last fall developing the rules, arguing about the rules. There were a lot of contentious meetings. There was a lot of back and forth about the rules on these issues. And in late November, they passed the rules, and that brings us into 2020. And as you said, Joe, the ordinance went into effect, the rules went into effect on February 1st. So that's pretty much the main background on the development of the Just Housing Ordinance.
All right, thanks, Mike. And I know that was quite a series of back and forth, and there was a lot of engagement there on realtor and housing provider behalf, and you definitely spearheaded that, and I definitely appreciate your work on that. So for property managers and landlords, what are the most important things to understand, and what changes must be made to the way they screen applicants for rental housing?
Yeah, so this is the big takeaway that I'd like you to have with our podcast this morning, because the big change really has to do with how you screen applicants. So the big rule change that people really need to be aware of is that when screening for all rental applicants, it now has to be done in 2 steps. So the first step is you have to pre-qualify an applicant based on their ability to pay. So with this, you're looking at the usual things, the traditional things that you do with tenant screening. You're looking at their income, their credit score, their employment history. You can even be asking for landlord references to get an idea of their tenant history. As long as you do those things consistently, you'll be fine. That's a major fair housing principle. Do those things consistently. So if you have a credit score, you use the same for all people. Now, if they are pre-qualified, you can go to the next step, and that is reviewing them on their criminal history or their criminal background. So the new law, the new rule says that you cannot look back at a person's criminal background and looking at their criminal convictions that are older than 3 years. This was one of the most contentious parts of the debate, was just how long this look back period would be. And they settled on 3 years. We were pushing for 7 or 5 years. But in the end, in a very close vote, they settled on a 3-year look back. Now, I do want to also remind you that there's a couple clear exclusions in the rules about a person's criminal history and things that you can deny. So if they are registered under the Sex Offender Act, doesn't matter how long, you can deny them. Also, if they have a residency restriction as a child sex offender, again, you can deny them no matter how long ago those criminal convictions took place. So as you're reviewing someone's criminal history and you discover a conviction in their background report, the housing provider must do what's called an individualized assessment. With this, the whole point is determining whether that person would be a demonstrable risk. That's a key term in both the ordinance and the rules, demonstrable risk. And this is something that we lobbied for. We want to be able to say, is this person a demonstrable risk? And so with this, you're looking at the severity of the crime, the nature of the crime. You're also looking at any nature or evidence of rehabilitation. You can also ask for references, have they, maybe from a minister or an employer, have they turned their life around? All of this is trying to determine in this individualized assessment whether this person would be a demonstrable risk. So if the housing provider determines after doing that individualized assessment that they would be a risk, you can deny them. So I think that's the most important thing, Joe, in the changes with this whole 2-step process. And I apologize for the background noise.
Oh, working at home always presents some interesting things in our world today. So you talked a little bit about this, but really this is creating an additional layer of rights for those that have been denied a criminal background, denied based upon their criminal background. So is there anything more you want to add on what those rights are for those that have been denied?
Yeah, I talked about the whole screening process. And so if you deny somebody, there are rights that come into play under the new rules. So the applicant can exercise their right if they're denied to do what's called an opportunity to dispute. And this is very clearly laid out in the rules. They have this opportunity. So if they choose to exercise this after they've been denied, they can produce information about the criminal conviction that was revealed in the background report. So they can perhaps provide some information about the accuracy. Sometimes these background reports do have inaccuracies in them. So they can say, look, here's the real story here. This is an inaccurate part of that report. Also, they can talk about the very things I talked about before. Here's how I've tried to turn my life around. How relevant is this crime for the suitability of living in the apartment? They can also provide things like letters of recommendation to talk specifically about how much of a risk they would not be in that case if they were exercising this opportunity to dispute. So that's a major new right that persons with a criminal background have. With this opportunity to dispute, there's a certain number of days that they have to produce this. So it's not open-ended. I believe it's 5 business days. One of the contentious points during the rules debate was whether the apartment had to be held open while they were exercising their right for this opportunity to dispute. That language on holding the unit open was removed. So yes, they have this kind of short period to produce this information while exercising the opportunity to dispute, but the landlord, the property owner, the housing provider can move on in that period of time while they're doing that. Throughout the rules, there's a couple other time frames that you need to be familiar with. And so I would encourage you to go to the Illinois Realtors website where we do get into the detail about that as it relates to these new rules. Joe, there's a couple other important items that I just wanted to mention with the Just Housing Ordinance and the rules. Keep in mind that this is a fair housing ordinance. So it's very serious. Violation of the ordinance, could result in license suspension. So you do have to take it very seriously. And it applies in all of Cook County. Also, one other requirement in the rules you should be aware of is that every applicant must be given at the time of application your tenant selection criteria. So this is all the information about how the applicant is going to be evaluated. One other thing, every applicant has to be given a notice of their right to dispute. So that opportunity to dispute that I talked about, part of the application and the intake will be providing them with that notice that they do have that right to dispute information that may come back in a criminal background report. So Joe, those are kind of the high points on the rules, and be happy to talk a little bit further with you if you have questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to point out here, because you mentioned the hold period, and that was a really big sticking point for us
Yes.
in the rule development process. And I look at that as a huge win for us. We engaged this, and this was in all the property managers I spoke to about this, that was their biggest concern, was that not only do they have to change their processes and procedures, but then they're almost, they're penalized. They essentially have to have a full reset on a rental property because of this whole holding period. The ability to get that removed was huge. And I want to point out that this kind of coincided with a call for action that Mike organized. Mike organized this call for action to the county board on these rules and specifically highlighted this holding period. That call for action in a very short amount of time, I think it was up over a weekend maybe.
Right.
If I remember correctly, it was maybe launched on a Friday. And by Monday morning, Board President Preckwinkle was copied on all those responses. And there was, I think, over 1,800 responses in that 48-hour period.
Yes.
That is 1,800 individual emails to Cook County Board President Preckwinkle. I get 50 emails in my inbox and I feel overwhelmed. So I think it helped us convey the point that was a big piece. And I don't believe it was any sort of accident that shortly thereafter they gave a concession on that and they removed that holding period. So I think that was a really big win in the process. So my hat's off to you, Mike, for the vision to do that. I think it was a smart move and it paid off.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for that comment, Joe, and thank you to the realtors who participated in the call for action. I think on that issue, that is so central to private property rights. Telling an owner that they have to hold open a unit in order to allow for this new right. And so I think that most of the members of the Cook County Board had calmer heads on that issue, and we prevailed on that issue happily.
And this is a good time to remind everyone, if you haven't done so yet, sign up for mobile alerts. You can text the word realtors to 30644, and that will sign you up for mobile alerts. So if you do it by email, it takes you about 30 seconds to reply. If you're really, really bad at typing, maybe it'll take you a minute and a half. If you do it by text message, it's 10 seconds. So it's a very easy way to engage and support your own industry on these issues. With that plug aside, so Mike, are there any tools for our agents, our landlords, our members to get a better handle on all these new rules and how to help them? What resources do we have to help them come into compliance on this?
Yes, there are, Joe. I mentioned the Illinois Realtors website. I encourage you to go to that because our legal counsel and staff worked on just kind of basic guidance in the form of a Q&A. So if you go to illinoisrealtors.org and you go to the legal section and then look under fair housing, you'll find that excellent Q&A that we put together. Also, the county's website has a really good flow chart on this. So if you go to the Cook County Commission on Human Rights, it's pretty prominent on their website on the just housing information. I think it's will give you some good guidance as well. Also, I wanted to mention a form that we put together. Shout out to our colleague, Adrian Morawski, who worked with a couple realtors in putting together this kind of intake form. It serves as kind of a checklist. And so once you read the checklist and kind of follow it, just in the order that it reads, and it's just a one-page checklist, you'll get an excellent idea of what the new rules are and how you should be operating and coming into compliance with the just housing rules if you use that form. So we're happy to get that form out to any members who request it.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. And you guys can email me if you want a copy of that form in particular. Feel free to send me an email and let me know you'd like that. I'm happy to share it anyway. As you guys should all well be aware, we're here to help support you, and please feel free to email me. With that, we will, doesn't look like we have any questions at this point. Mike, you've done a stupendous job of summing up a very complex issue and something that's really big impact. There's been a few things over the years that have been big impacts, specifically to Cook County. I always think to source of income protection is probably one about 7-8 years ago now that had a huge impact. And I think this similarly has a big impact on the way you operate. So Mike, thank you for the information, and thanks for taking some time out of your very busy day to chat with us.
Thank you, Joe. Glad to do it.
All right. Stay well, Mike.
You too.
So just housing is an issue that, like I said, has a significant impact on rental property owners. I mean, and anyone involved in rental property, tenants, agents, anyone. So if you are involved with anything rental, make sure to be informed. Information on this topic is available, like Mike said. We also have other information available, like on the other subject I mentioned, which was source of income protections. Another big issue for property managers. And you can make sure and check out what's available from Illinois Realtors legal team. They've provided a lot of resources, information on that. If you go to illinoisrealtors.org/legal, you'll find a ton of information on this and other things there. So Mike just highlighted You know what? I'm going to jump in here. We have one question here. Mike, if you could jump in for me real quick and answer this.
Sure.
So this is a Cook County ordinance, correct? And this doesn't apply if you are in Lake County or DuPage County or outside of Cook County. Is this going to have an impact on you?
If you are a practitioner in one of the outlying counties, it will apply to you if the property that you're representing or the property owner that you're working with is in Cook County. Then yeah, you're going to have to come in compliance with the just housing ordinance. One thing I do want to add on that point is the Illinois General Assembly did pass a bill last year, and it went into effect of January this year, that makes just arrests a protected class under the Illinois Human Rights Act. So you need to be mindful of that. You cannot discriminate against somebody just because of an arrest. Typically, you do not see arrests in a criminal background report from the credit bureaus, so it really shouldn't be an issue. They really do focus on convictions. But again, outside of the Cook County, you do need to be aware of that state law because that applies statewide. The just housing ordinance also includes arrests as well as a protected class under the fair housing.
That's a great point, Mike. I think there is a substantial difference between an arrest and a conviction, and that is a good distinction to know. So thank you, Mike.
Joe, if I could add one other thing.
Yeah.
I know a lot of our members use the Forewarn app. It's usually on their phones
Yes.
or another device. And so we've gotten a lot of questions. You've got a lot of questions about whether you can still use that. Our attorney has advised that, yeah, you can still use it, but you can't use it in a discriminatory manner. So, for example, to simply see through the app that somebody has a criminal background and you choose not to do any screening or have any further discussions or do any intake with that potential applicant, that would have you be running afoul of this new law. So you do have to do your typical intake and screening in the manner that I described and that is laid out in the rules. Now, having said that, the just housing ordinance, doesn't say you can't take steps to keep yourself safe. And so if you do see something and you are concerned and you're, say, going to be meeting with this person who has a criminal background, or you're going to be showing them a rental unit, think about safety. Think about bringing someone with you. Maybe meeting this person initially in a public spot where there are other people. That's just sort of our advice on that. And we know this is a sensitive issue, but the bottom line is you can still use that. You just need to be very mindful of how you're using it, making sure that you're in compliance with the just housing rules.
That's a great point, Mike. Thank you. And I think, the getting back to the documentation pieces of all this as well, I think that probably falls in there as well, is making sure that what you're doing protects yourself, protects the rights of those you're serving and of the tenants, the property owners, and documenting those pieces is a big part of all this.
Yes, that's a great point.
Well, again, Mike, thanks for the time today. You are an icon and a brilliant mind when it comes to local private property rights, and I really thank you for that.
Wow, thank you for that very much. Good to be with you, Joe.
So Mike highlighted an issue here, but that's just one of the local issues where Illinois REALTORS is engaged on your behalf and where NSBAR is engaging as well. Myself and my GAD colleagues all around the state are working with local governments every day to promote your interests and your clients' interests. When you think of just housing, there are many other issues that impact whether it's a property owner for rental, a commercial realtor, or purchase transactions. Local government impacts those every day. with issues like pre-sale inspections and transfer stamps, zoning. All these things are issues that impact you, and we're here to fight for you and your clients. To learn more about these issues we're working on, I recommend you follow NSBAR's social media. You can see updates on NSBAR.org. And of course, you have GADcast. So make sure to check out our next episode where we'll continue to talk about the fight for private property rights. Until then, be well, everyone.